Class 10 Math video solution to the sample paper given by the board for the board examination to be conducted in 2021. This is a basic version of the paper. It's a 5-mark question. This is from the chapter Arithmetic Progressions. An interesting question, right? The pth, qth and rth term of an arithmetic progression are a, b and c respectively. Show that a times q minus r plus b times r minus p plus c times p minus q is equal to 0, right? The concept is very simple, but the algebra behind it is quite intensive. So, you need to be very careful in solving this question to be able to establish that the LHS when resolved is going to give you 0 as the answer. Let's get started. The concept that we are going to be using is to finding out the formula to find out the nth term of an arithmetic progression. The nth term of an arithmetic progression an is equal to a1 plus n minus 1 times the common difference d. The pth term is equal to a is what they are saying. So, AP will be equal to A1 plus P minus 1 times the common difference D is equal to RA. We will rewrite this. I am going to write it as A1 plus PD minus D. So, I am going to rewrite this A is equal to A1 minus D, A1 minus D plus a PD, just so that at the final stages the calculation becomes a little easier. We will be able to spot terms which are equal, right. So, it basically is the same thing, A1 plus PD minus D, A1 plus PD minus D is what we have. Just rewritten it so that I am taking this A1 minus D as a term clubbed together as one thing. You will realize that this term becomes a common element for each of these A, B and C. Let us go to the second part, which is we are trying to find out the qth term. AQ is equal to A1 plus Q minus 1 times the common difference D. This is equal to B. I am going to rewrite this one also, A1 plus QD minus D. So, we will take A1 minus D together and we will write this QD as a separate term, right. We will go to the rth term, AR is equal to A1 plus R minus 1 times the common difference, which is equal to a C. So, this I am going to write it as again A1 minus D plus RD, A1 minus D plus RD. Now, what do we have here? We will have to prove A into Q minus R. A is nothing but A1 minus D plus PD, that into Q minus R plus B into R minus P. B is this expression, this into R minus P, and C is this expression into P minus Q is what we have, right. Let us take all of this to the next slide and then work there. So, A into Q minus R is basically going to be A1 minus D plus PD. This is the value of A, this times Q minus R, plus the value of B is A1 minus D plus a QD, this times R minus P, and the third term is basically C, which is A1 minus D times RD plus RD times P minus Q is what we have. We are working with the left hand side. Finally, we will have to establish that this is equal to 0, right. Now, let us look at it. What do we have? A1 minus D, right. A1 minus D, I am going to take as a term A1 minus D into Q minus R, A1 minus D into R minus P, A1 minus D into P minus Q is going to be the, when I multiply each of these things inside, that is what it is going to pan out to. So, that would essentially be A1 minus D into Q minus R plus R minus P plus P minus Q, right. So, essentially multiplied Q minus R with A1 minus D, R minus P with A1 minus D and P minus Q with A1 minus D, and taken A1 minus D as a common term. So, this is what we have as one part, plus we have to multiply it with each of these terms. So, I am going to take D as a term common outside, that will leave us with P into Q minus R, which is this part, PD into Q minus R, taken D common outside. Similarly, QD into R minus P, D is taken common outside. So, we have Q into R minus P is what we have, and finally RD into P minus Q, D is taken common outside. So, there is going to be R into P minus Q, right. This is what we have. Check out what we have here. Q gets cancelled with minus Q, P with minus P, R with minus R. So, this part is A1 minus D times 0. So, this is going to be a 0. Let us check out what we have here. So, the 0 is taken care of, 0 plus D times PQ minus PR, expanding this, plus QR minus QP, which is the same as PQ, plus PR minus QR is what we have. PQ gets cancelled with minus PQ, QR with minus QR, PR with minus PR. So, this also is 0. So, 0 plus D times 0 is equal to 0. So, what we set about proving that LHS is equal to RHS So hence proved whatever we have to prove, right? The crux of solving this question, actually, you can get it even otherwise, by taking this a1 minus d plus pd, writing it that way, we are able to get that a1 minus d as a term common outside, which makes this entire algebra a manageable component. If you had just expanded all terms and done it, you would have ended up writing something very big and would not have known what gets cancelled, what is not getting cancelled. So if you see this question, keep this in mind. If you get a question of this kind in the real examination, in the final board examination, make sure that you are able to segregate it and write it this way, which makes cancelling terms so much easier.
Before you leave, I want you to do two things. One, sign up at online.maxtute.com to get started with CBSE Class 10 Math online tuitions. It takes all of 5 minutes and less than 3 steps to get started. And second thing, I want you to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so that you get notified every time a new video is uploaded. Spread the word about this channel to your friends and classmates.